I am the legitimate daughter of the Langya Wang clan, with a noble status comparable to that of a princess. Since childhood, I have been raised to become a matriarch of the clan, destined to marry the eldest grandson of the Chenjun Xie clan as his principal wife upon reaching adulthood. However, on the eve of the wedding, my betrothed, Xie Qilang, fell in love with the unyielding daughter of a disgraced official and went to great lengths to break off our engagement. I became the laughingstock of the entire capital and had no choice but to flee in haste. He reappeared before everyone 3 years later at the first birthday celebration of Xie Qilang's eldest son. Yet, the once passionate young master of the Xie family, who had defied all for love, now had no trace of fervent affection in his eyes. He gazed indifferently at the daughter of a disgraced official, whom he had schemed tirelessly to marry, and coldly demanded, with such disgraceful behavior, "How can you manage the household?" As soon as these words were spoken, the entire hall erupted in uproar. If the young mistress of the Xie clan loses her authority to manage the household, it is equivalent to being abandoned by her husband. In the future, whether within the inner household or in the capital, she will no longer be able to establish herself. At the banquet, many of the women couldn't help but glance in my direction. After all, this young mistress was the one the Xie clan was willing to give up a daughter of the Wang family like me to marry, and my Wang family is not some insignificant household. We are the powerful and influential Langya Wang clan, capable of influencing the world's affairs. The eldest grandson's wife, who was brought back at such a great cost, is now being trampled upon like this. How can one not sigh in regret? Lady Xie the Fourth sat beside me, gloating as she said, "My brother has finally reached his limit. In these past 3 years, the Lin family has repeatedly made mistakes, causing my brother to lose face countless times." She glanced at me and said casually, "Wang Shan, if you had become my sister-in-law back then, you certainly wouldn't have." I interrupted her calmly, "Fourth miss, be careful with your words." She fell silent resentfully. The ladies and young misses around were pointing fingers at Lin. But Xie Qilang did not say a single word in defense of his wife. Just like when I suddenly learned that my engagement had been broken off and rushed to the Xie residence to demand an explanation from Xie Qilang, he only shielded the woman he loved behind him, allowing others to mock me to their heart's content. At that time, because the broken engagement had brought shame to my family, I became an outcast, and everyone felt they could step on me. Now my father has taken over from my grandfather as the new head of the Wang family of Langya, and with great momentum, he has brought me back to the capital. The target of everyone's flattery has once again become me. Those who once mocked and ridiculed me are now turning their hostility toward the vulnerable Lin family in an attempt to curry favor with me. Yet I do not feel any satisfaction. A woman's circumstances should not be determined by the whims of men. I shouldn't have gone through that back then, and she shouldn't be going through this now. The one at fault is clearly the fickle man. I looked at the young woman standing in the crowd, her face full of unease. It's hard to connect her with the steadfast young woman she once was. Back in the day, not even life and death could make her bow her head. Yet now, a simple mistake in the banquet seating was enough to shatter her completely. Such a weak and incompetent woman, such a fickle and heartless man. I was once driven to the brink by these two individuals. This farce finally came to an end when Xie Qilang's mother hurriedly arrived. Aunt Xie is the most qualified matriarch I have ever seen. She is clear-headed, rational, and decisive in her methods, always maintaining an unbeatable position in the household. Now, a few strands of silver have even appeared at her temples. It seems that these past few years have not been easy for her. She soothed the guests, took her daughter-in-law who had caused the embarrassment away, and preserved the dignity of the Xie family. She only gave me a subtle, inscrutable nod as she passed by. I returned the gesture with a slight bow. She patted my hand and said affectionately, "It's been years since I last saw you. Shana, you've grown so much. You must come to the manor in a couple of days so we can have a good chat." I sneered inwardly. If it weren't for the fact that she never once spoke up for me during the whole ordeal of the broken engagement back then, I might have actually believed in her affection. I nodded politely, and she hurried away, and that Lin woman kept her head down the whole time, not even daring to meet my gaze, flustered and embarrassed. Just like when I hastily left the capital all those years ago, when I sat down again, Miss Xie the Fourth gently nudged my arm, and I followed her gaze, not far away. I found Xie Qilang looking at me with a complicated expression. Compared to 3 years ago, he now appears much more composed and dignified. However, the way he looked at me seemed to carry a deeper meaning, far from innocent. It couldn't help but remind me of the first time I discovered his unfaithfulness back then. In the 5th year of Chengkang, Imperial Censor Lin's outspoken remonstrance angered the emperor, and his entire family was exiled to Jiaozhou. He had long been known for his integrity. And on the day of his departure from the city, thousands of people came to see him off. Lin Aoshue, the youngest daughter of the Lin family, publicly questioned heaven 3 times, voicing grievances for her family, seeking justice for loyal officials, and demanding clarity for the world. Each word she spoke was filled with anguish, shocking scholars across the land. It also stunned my fiancé, Lord Xie. That day happened to be when Lord Xie was returning to the capital from his travels. So I arranged to meet Lady Xie outside the city to welcome him. When we arrived, we saw him playing the qin under a tree, bidding farewell to the Lin family with the melody Guangling San. His gaze fell upon Lin Aoshue, filled with an indescribable tenderness and affection. Xie Qilang is the young master of the Chenjun Xie clan, known for his strategic mind and renowned throughout the land. Even someone as aloof as Lin Aoshue couldn't help but blush under the gaze of such an ethereal figure. The ambiguous affection between the two was so palpable that I could see it clearly, even through the crowd. At that moment, I suddenly realized that the childhood sweetheart I had grown up with might no longer be mine to keep. Sure enough, that day when Xie Qilang returned to the mansion, he remained restless and uneasy. That very night, he took the private soldiers of the Xie family out of the city and pursued them. Thinking of this, I smiled mockingly. I still remember asking Xie Qilang on the day I left the capital, with only a few encounters between him and Lin Aoshue, could that really outweigh the more than 10 years we spent growing up together? Xie Qilang's usually cold and aloof face showed a touch of tenderness. He told me that such a first encounter was enough to be remembered for a lifetime. Yet now, it is also him who shows no respect or regard for his wife. A husband's affection truly passes like fleeting clouds, vanishing in an instant. I felt disinterested and decided to leave early. If it weren't for my mother's discomfort today, I wouldn't have attended the banquet on her behalf. Nowadays, my status is completely different from before. Even if others still want to discuss the incident where my engagement was broken off back then, they wouldn't dare to bring it up openly. My early departure wouldn't give anyone any reason to criticize me. The servant of the Xie residence led me to a secluded corner. Xie Qilang stood quietly under the corridor, and upon hearing the footsteps, he turned to look. I stopped in my tracks. The afternoon sunlight poured freely upon him, casting a golden glow around him. It was as if I saw once again the young man who had carefully nurtured and protected me as I grew up. Since childhood, my own elder brother loved to tease me, often making me stomp in anger, every time. It was Brother Xie who helped me get revenge, beating my brother until he begged for mercy. From a young age, the flowers and plants in my courtyard, as well as the rare treasures in my private collection, were almost all found by Xie Qilang. Unfortunately, the young man I admired in my youth has now become the person before me, completely unrecognizable. Seeing that I had no intention of speaking, he said gently, "Why won't you even call me brother now?" As if a single sentence could erase all the past disgrace, I said calmly, "Young Master Xie, please don't joke. We've both grown up now. I haven't yet congratulated the Xie family on the birth of their great-grandson. My father is truly unable to get away today. Otherwise he would have personally come to share a cup of wine. However, the truth is something both he and I are well aware of. Once my father took over power, he made no attempt to hide his disdain for the Xie family. Not to mention a mere first-year celebration, even the birthday banquet of the Xie family head might not be enough to secure his attendance. However, the Xie family did feel guilty about the broken engagement back then, and they still didn't know the exact number of the Wang family's private soldiers, so they dared not act recklessly. The current emperor also hails from a prominent family and allows noble houses to train private soldiers. My father spent 3 years biding his time before seizing power from my grandfather with his secretly raised army. Now, the power my father holds is enough to make other prominent families wary. Xiechilong let out a long sigh. Shan, I was wrong back then. I made you suffer, but I have regretted it. After you left, I knelt at your house for 3 days, but your father and brother refused to tell me where you were. Most of my guards are still out there searching for you. Shan, I truly know I was wrong. Will you forgive me? I quietly looked at his eyes and brows, as if trying to discern how much sincerity was truly there. But in the end, all I saw was deep affection and pain. I smiled. Brother Xie, do you know what happened when the engagement was called off? Such a major event as breaking off an engagement, how could you not know the impact it would have on a woman? You could have asked your father and grandfather to visit my elders and discuss it amicably. But instead, you brought your private guards into the residence and provoked my grandfather with your words, as if my Wang family were desperately clinging to this marriage arrangement. My grandfather, humiliated by this great insult, immediately ordered me to reflect on my mistakes in the ancestral hall. I didn't even know the full story before I was taken there. On the 3rd night in the ancestral hall, when I was in a state of extreme panic and unease, Nanny Zheng, who serves my grandmother, suddenly appeared. She had been sent by my grandmother to order me to take my own life, in order to preserve the Wang family's reputation. The white silk wrapped around my neck again and again. I will never forget the ferocious expression on Madame Zheng's face. It was my father who willingly surrendered all the assets of our branch and promised to send me away. That saved me from the brink of death. Thinking of the tragic scene back then, I slightly lowered my eyes and my breathing grew faint. My father and brother had my best interests at heart, but I was so foolish. Even as the carriage was about to leave the city, I still wanted to confront you face to face and demand an explanation. I rushed to the Xie residence to find you. But how did you treat me? He shielded Lin Aoshue behind him, afraid that I might harm her, and to cut off my pestering. When others mocked and belittled me, he didn't speak a single word in my defense. In this whole matter, what wrong did I actually do? The engagement was not my wish. The breaking of the engagement was not my decision. I was merely at an age of youthful sincerity, taught a lesson I will never forget by the man in my heart. Xiechilong's eyes were filled with guilt and heartache, but there was no surprise. I laughed at myself mockingly. So he actually knew everything. Yes, he is the young master of the Xie family, no matter how well the dirty deeds in the capital are hidden. It's impossible for him not to have investigated them at all. I gave Xiechilong a bow of equal status and said calmly, "So, Brother Xie, please don't say anything about forgiveness anymore. Between you and me, there lies half a life. This matter will never be over for me." I walked past him and left. When I reached the moon gate, he called out to stop me. "Ashley, believe it or not, I never intended to hurt you, since I can remember. Every step I've taken has followed the arrangements of my father and grandfather. I thought life was meant to be this way." When Lin appeared, I felt like a prisoner in a cell finally seeing daylight. She defied conventions, unafraid of worldly judgments even in her lowest moments, daring enough to question heaven and earth. I almost couldn't wait to hold on to her. "On the day of the grand wedding, I heard you were sent away from the capital. Such a delicate young lady like you. How could you survive alone out there?" I fell seriously ill, and all the memories from my youth came rushing back, burning my heart like a raging fire. That was when I knew I had committed an unforgivable mistake. His voice grew softer and softer, but I didn't listen any further and walked straight away. It's nothing but empty words to shirk responsibility and avoid the important points. If I didn't still have some use for him, I wouldn't even bother saying a single word to him today. After returning home and paying my respects to my mother, I went to my father's study. I remember that when I was young, the thing my father said most often was that after my siblings and I got married, he would take my mother to find a secluded paradise to live in seclusion. He had no desire to contend for power or influence, only wishing to wander among the mountains and waters, quietly listening to the whispers of the pines, and live out his life freely. Yet now, for my sake, he has taken up the reins of power, Father was not attending to official duties at the moment. Instead, he was frowning before a row of priceless jewelry. When he saw me come in, he finally showed a smile. "Come quickly, Shana, your father is choosing a headdress for you." He stroked his beard and said with a headache, "At tomorrow's palace banquet. You must make a grand entrance and shut those gossiping women up." This troubled look was hardly befitting the head of a prominent noble family. I walked over and rested my head on my father's shoulder. He muttered, "What kind of behavior is this? You're a grown girl now, even your father should keep some distance." But he raised his hand and patted my head, with a mix of nostalgia and emotion. He said, "When you were born, you were so tiny. The imperial physician said you were premature and weak, and it would be hard for you to survive. Father held you in his arms day and night, always filled with fear, afraid that if he wasn't careful, you would be gone. Later, you grew into a chubby little child, and every time you saw Father, you would smile, like a lucky doll. You don't know how much joy it brought to Father's heart. Shana, Father doesn't feel regret, whether entering officialdom or living in seclusion. The primary condition is that you and your siblings are safe and happy. If you are doing well, Father will take your mother and retreat to a life of contentment. If you are not doing well, Father will clear all obstacles and protect you along the way. This is Father's responsibility as a parent, not to mention, when your grandfather and uncles decided to abandon you. The bond of father and son, the bond of brothers, had already died in Father's heart, so, you must no longer blame yourself." Tears welled up in my eyes, feeling both moved and heartbroken. If I had been born into any other noble family, I would not have survived being rejected in marriage 3 years ago. What virtue or ability do I, Wang Shan, possess to deserve such a wonderful family? After talking with my father for a while, I returned to my own courtyard. As soon as I entered the inner chamber, I saw the young man in red sitting by the window on the daybed. He was not yet of age, and though his every gesture was elegant, he could never hide the wild and unrestrained spirit in his brow. When he saw me, he snorted coldly and said with displeasure, "Returning so late, could it be that seeing an old acquaintance has stirred up past feelings?" His expression remained unchanged, but the hand resting casually on his leg had clenched into a fist. It shows how nervous he is inside. I acted as if he didn't exist and walked behind the screen to change into my everyday clothes. The young man was startled and began to stammer. "Why, how can you be so bold?" Then, like a gust of wind, he leaped out of the window. I couldn't help but laugh, and the gloom in my heart dissipated a little. 3 years ago, I left the capital heading north, traveling light with a simple carriage, so the journey was naturally uncomfortable. I was physically and mentally exhausted, crying myself to sleep almost every night. But halfway through the journey, a young man shamelessly blocked the road, insisting on traveling with me. He was travel-worn and knew me extremely well, clearly having pursued me all the way from the capital. At that time, I was utterly helpless, and without hesitation, I grasped at this lifeline. Throughout the most difficult 3 years, this person remained by my side. During our travels, he endured hardships with me, and when we returned to the ancestral land of Langya, he stood by me in facing the challenges posed by our clansmen. Finally, step by step, I walked out of the gloom. 3 days later at the palace banquet, I appeared before everyone in splendid attire. Even the usually stern censor couldn't help but praise my appearance to my father. The stern expressions on my father and brother's faces were almost impossible to maintain. If they had tails, they would surely be wagging them vigorously. As soon as I took my seat, my mother was surrounded by noble women inquiring about my marriage prospects. Mother's face appeared calm, but her entire aura had come to life. With no trace of the illness from the past 2 days, I found it somewhat amusing, not daring to disturb my family's moment of triumphant pride. After all, over the past 3 years, they had suffered from rumors because of me and had truly been holding back their frustrations. Just as I was pouring myself a drink, suddenly, a slender figure blocked my view. I slightly raised my head and saw Lin Aoshue standing gracefully under the moonlight, her delicate charm evoking a sense of pity. Just by meeting my gaze, she seemed to muster immense courage. "Miss, would you care to share a drink with me?" I nodded faintly, and she breathed a sigh of relief before taking a seat beside me. The surrounding women kindly stepped aside, but their attention remained fixed on the two of us. After all, everyone was as curious as I was about what this young Mistress Xie would say to me. Lin Aoshue first poured the warmed peach blossom wine into my cup before speaking in a sorrowful tone. It has been 3 years, yet you remain as radiant as ever, my lady. I have always remembered, the first time I saw the lady, I felt she was like the bright, lofty moon, unattainable and high above. Everyone is discussing, wondering what kind of gentleman could possibly be worthy of the lady's noble grace. Later, when I met the 7th Lord, I finally understood the meaning of a well-matched marriage. I drained the wine in my cup, my expression unchanged. My mind, however, was preoccupied with what had happened last autumn in Liangju with another person. In the vast desert, that person carried a water pouch at their waist but refused to let me take a single sip. I was so desperate that I went mad trying to snatch it, eventually collapsing from exhaustion. By the time I woke up, I had already been rescued. Only then did I realize we had long run out of water. That person filled the water pouch with sand, giving me the hope to carry on. Then, late at night, they nourished me with their own blood, granting me life. At this thought, I lowered my head and smiled. Lin thought I was moved by her words and stopped reminiscing about the past. She took a deep breath and pleaded earnestly, "Young lady, you are of noble status and have a bright future ahead of you. Could you please not take Qilang away? Our child is still young and cannot be separated from their mother." My good mood was instantly ruined. "Please be cautious with your words, young Madam Xie. You just said I am unattainable, and indeed that is the case. Xie Qilang could not reach me before, and even less so now. The state Lin is in now truly disappoints me somewhat. Can the inner quarters truly wear a woman down to such an extent?" I couldn't help but feel emotional and ended up saying a few more words. "Young Mistress Xie, it shouldn't be me who makes you uneasy. Back then, I was just as lost as you are now, thinking that the world was vast and there was no one left to hold an umbrella for me. But someone once told me that a woman's loyalty and courage should not be confined to the inner chambers." Later, I did many things I never dared to imagine before. Just you watch, the family's glory is merely the icing on the cake. My name, Wang Shan, will ultimately be remembered by the world because of my own deeds. If we can stand on our own feet, we will never again fear the attitudes of others. Madam, rest assured, I, Wang Shan, will never look back." At that moment, a loud clang came from behind, and both Lady Lin and I turned to look. Xie Qilang stood there with a pale face, not far away. And it was unclear how long he had been listening. The wine cup in his hand had already fallen to the ground. It was only then that I realized the music that had been playing all along had stopped at some point, and everyone in the hall was looking in our direction. Xie Qilang quickly regained his composure. He took 2 steps forward, grabbed Lin's wrist, and scolded in a low voice, "Come back with me." Then he dragged her away. I have known him since childhood, but I have never seen him so distraught before, so I couldn't help but take a few more glances. But when I turned my head, I met the gaze of the young man in red sitting at the head of the male guests' table. Among all the guests in the hall, only he was bold enough to wear such striking red attire. At that moment, his gaze was cold and distant as he looked in my direction. For some reason, I felt inexplicably guilty. After the palace banquet officially began, Lady Xie IV returned to her seat beside me. As the legitimate daughter of the Xie family, her seat was naturally arranged next to mine. But at this moment, her expression was complicated, no longer showing the cautious flattery from before. "Wang Shan, is it really over between you and my elder brother? My mother said that if you are willing, the position of my elder brother's principal wife is always reserved for you. Mother will take Sheng'er to raise by her side. And it certainly won't affect your life. In the future, your children will be the heirs of the Xie family." I glanced at her, feeling genuinely annoyed with the Xie family. "Sister Xie, do you know why you used to call me 11th lady when we were young? But ever since I returned this time, you've unconsciously been calling me Wang Shan from the start. Because my status has changed, you no longer dare to treat me as casually as you did when we were children. So as the only daughter of the main branch of the Wang family, why on earth do you, the Xie family, think I would be willing to lower my status to become someone's second wife?" Is it because of how you bullied and humiliated me 3 years ago, pushing me to the brink of death? The fourth daughter of the Xie family looked extremely embarrassed, opening her mouth but not knowing what to say. Finally, she took a seal from her sleeve and handed it to me. Wang Shan. This was entrusted to me by your brother. After the emperor and empress leave the banquet, he invites you to meet him in the bamboo grove. There are some things he wishes to say to you in person. I took the seal, my fingers tracing the crooked characters carved on its base. This is a scrap seal I used for practice when I first started carving at the age of 10. The first batch of ruined seals were given to my father, brother, and Xie Qilang. The matter of breaking off the engagement back then was too sudden, and I really didn't handle it properly. If the Xie family were to produce some letters and items, it would still affect my reputation. I do need to meet with him to retrieve these things properly. I just wonder if some people might be displeased if they find out I meet with Xie Qilang in private later. Thinking of this, I subtly glanced at the young man in red across from me, only to find him gazing drunkenly at the dancers performing in the center of the hall. Halfway through the banquet, the emperor and empress finally arrived hand in hand. A faint smile touched the corner of my lips as I rose with the others to pay my respects. The emperor, having just recovered from a serious illness, appeared rather weary. His health might not hold out much longer, so as soon as he took his seat, he got straight to the point. Last year, after the great victory in Liangzhu, I mentioned that 2 individuals crossed the desert, risking their lives to deliver the military report to the relief camp. At that time, these 2 individuals were not in the capital, so the matter of commendation was delayed. Now that they have returned, I will not keep it hidden any longer. He stroked his beard and said gently, "Ninth young master, Lady Wang the 11th, step forward." Amid the astonished gazes of the crowd, I and the young man in red from the male guest seats, who was Xiao Ju Lang of the Lanling Xiao clan, stepped forward together to receive the decree. The Lanling Xiao clan is both a prestigious noble family and the current imperial family, and Xiao Zhoulang is also the 9th prince of the present dynasty. A person of such status, however, concealed his identity and accompanied me in exile for 3 years. The emperor looked at Xiao Zhoulang and then at me with a face full of affection, saying, "During the Huainan flood, the 2 of you assisted in repairing the embankments, bringing stability to the people on behalf of the imperial family. In the Jizhou snow disaster, you traveled north from Langya to deliver grain, comforting the victims, and when Liangzhu was attacked, it was you 2 children who risked your lives to seek reinforcements, lifting the siege of Liangzhu." He looked at my father and said with some pride, "Wang Xian, you've raised your daughter well. But my 9th prince is also quite outstanding." My heart tightened, fearing that his next words would be a marriage proposal. I still have some unresolved personal grievances with the Xie family, and a marriage proposal at this time would disrupt my plans. To my surprise, my father replied with great pride, "Your Majesty, in that case, why not grant my daughter the title of a princess?" The emperor shook his head and chuckled wryly. In the grand hall filled with court officials and prominent families, only my father dared to speak to him in such a manner. The emperor did not respond but turned to Xiao Zhoulang and asked, "Zhoulang, what is it that you desire?" As soon as the words were spoken, a commotion arose from the Xie family's seating area. I turned to look and saw that it was Xie Qilang again. He spilled the hot wine on his hand, and the servant was frantically cleaning it up for him. Xie Qilang's gaze was fixed directly on me, his eyes filled with undisguised anger. It was probably only then that he realized I had spent the past 3 years away with Xiao Zhoulang, and the reason he couldn't find any trace of me during those 3 years was thanks to Xiao Zhoulang's cover. I glanced at him for a moment before looking away. Thus, I saw Lin Aoshue sitting behind Xie Qilang, her face full of bewilderment. I gave her a slight nod, only to hear the person beside me snort coldly, using my sleeve as a barrier. I deliberately and casually brushed against Xiao Zhoulang's hand. He then restrained himself a bit and answered the emperor's questions. "I haven't thought of anything for now, father. You can owe me for the time being." Thus, that night, I became a powerful princess with achievements and a fiefdom. From then on, no one dared to look down on me, whether in public or in private. In 2 days, after the imperial list is posted, I, Wang Shan, will also become famous throughout the land. After the emperor and empress left, the young men and women gathered in small groups to go see the lanterns. I stood up and walked toward the small bamboo grove. Halfway there, a sudden force pulled me into the rockery. A deliberately lowered voice gritted through clenched teeth. Are you really going to meet that Xie Wang Shan? Do you even have a heart? His hand gently rubbed my wrist, and suddenly he became aggrieved again, before returning to the capital. You clearly said you would never repeat the same mistake. I broke free from his hand and asked discontentedly, Xiao Zhoulang, were the dancers beautiful? Xiao Zhoulang paused, his eyes filled with confusion. I mimicked his manner and snorted coldly, speaking sarcastically. What, you were watching so intently just now, yet you still had the mind to eavesdrop on my conversation with someone else. Xiao Zhoulang bristled like a dog with its fur standing on end. Wang Shan. Don't make false accusations. When did I ever look at those so-called dancers? From start to finish, I was only watching you. After saying this, he turned his head away, feeling completely uneasy. Young lady, don't try to change the subject. Anyway, you cannot go to see Xie. I forbid it. If you want to go, you'll have to step over my dead body. He used to think I liked gentlemen as gentle and refined as Xie, so he always restrained his true nature in front of me. Pretending to be elegant and indifferent, this was the first time he had been so unreasonable. Perhaps he himself felt embarrassed, as he refused to look at me the entire time. I sighed inwardly. I nodded. All right, if you don't want to see me, then we won't see each other. With that said, I turned and left. Preparing to retrace my steps, Xiao Zhoulang grew anxious, reached out to hook my waist, and pulled me into his embrace. Seeing the panic on my face, he quickly released me. Shana. I didn't mean to be disrespectful, I was just acting in the heat of the moment. Please don't be angry. Both he and I were flushed and at a loss. After a while, he asked softly, I'll have the servant escort you back. In a couple of days, I'll take you to the Western Mountain Zen Temple to fulfill your vow. All right. I nodded and hurriedly followed the servant as I left. I no longer remembered anything about Xie, only feeling the spot on my waist where he had touched me earlier burning hot. The next morning, I went to the moat with my maids and guards in a grand procession. It was the season of bright spring days and fresh green grass, and many people were heading out of the city in groups for a spring outing. By the river, I personally burned the old keepsakes, while my maid stood on the embankment explaining to passers-by that the Wang family's daughter was disposing of the gifts exchanged during the engagement period with the Xie family. If Xie had any sense of shame, he should have disposed of the old belongings as I did. If he has no shame and later uses my personal items to harm me, I will have a defense. Such commotion quickly drew the attention of the Xie family. I just didn't expect that Xie himself would come. He has always been fond of cleanliness, yet he is still wearing the robe from last night's palace banquet, and his complexion is very pale. I frowned slightly. Could it be because I didn't show up for the appointment last night? The Xie family guards dispersed the onlookers and stood watch on the shore. Xie walked up to me. I calmly bowed to him. Thank you, Brother Xie. I intended to speak with you yesterday as well. The Wang and Xie families have been acquainted for a long time. When I was young and didn't know any better, I gave you some things. Could you return them to me? This would be better for both of us. He looked at the calligraphy practice sheets burning in the brazier, the ones he had personally written for me when I first began my education as a child. In the wide-open chest, there were also some small trinkets he had once given me. When we were young, he was truly good to me, personally selecting many gifts and even learning how to make women's accessories just for me. Xie closed his eyes, his voice trembling with emotion. Shan, we have known and accompanied each other not for a day or two, but for 15 years. Are you really so heartless that you can let go so easily? I looked at him with a face full of surprise. You actually know that we've known and been together for 15 years. How dare you bring up our past relationship? He looked at me with a pained expression and brought up the old topic again. I truly thought at the time that since your elders adored you so much, breaking off the engagement would at most make you keep a low profile for a while. I intended to let you endure a period of hardship, and once the situation calmed down, I would have my mother visit to formally adopt you as her goddaughter. When you married in the future, you would have dowries from both the Wang and Xie families. Enough to ensure your lifelong security. As the young master of the Xie family, he rarely felt the need to explain himself to others. At this moment, he was desperately trying to make me understand that he had never intended to harm me. I don't know how to say it to make me believe. Xie Qilang had no choice but to say solemnly, Asha, I truly regret it. Can you trust me one more time? This time, I offer the entire Xie family as a betrothal gift, only asking for another chance from you. He took a step forward and said in a deep voice, I give you what I value most. From now on, no one can compare to you in my heart. Could you let go a little slower and turn back to look at me once more? He lowered his posture to the extreme, almost pleading. I still remember that year when I was 12, when the two prominent families, Wang and Xie, formally established their marriage alliance under the witness of the clan elders, although I hadn't yet come to understand matters of the heart at that time. Knowing that I would one day marry brother Xie filled me with great joy. As a noble lady like me, I have enjoyed the family's glory since birth, and my only destiny is to marry for alliance, having no other choice. How fortunate I am to marry my elder brother, who has always cherished me since childhood. From that moment on, I cautiously looked forward to my coming-of-age ceremony, but as I waited and waited, what I ended up with was him casting me into hell. Perhaps there is still some unwillingness in my heart, so I ask him softly, Brother Xie, back then it was clearly your Xie family who came to propose marriage to me. Why is it that when you changed your heart, all the bitter consequences must be borne by me? Do you know how my father, my mother, and my brother have been living these past 3 years? Why is it that your Xie family can bully me so wantonly? Xie Qilang clutched his chest, utterly defeated. Ashan. What if I repay you everything I owe? But you know my methods. Whatever Xie Qilang wants will inevitably belong to me, and no one can stop it. In the 8th year of Chengkang, 3 years after the annulment of the engagement, the Xie family finally revealed the inside story of the broken engagement with the Wang family. Xie Qilang took all the blame upon himself and transferred half of his personal assets to me as compensation. The wife of the Xie family head personally visited the Wang family to apologize to my mother. These actions placed the current young mistress, Lady Lin, in a very awkward position. Sure enough, not long after, Lin Aoshue, the humble-born noble lady once praised by scholars across the land, was sent to the family temple on trumped-up charges. At that time, I was admiring the flowers at the Western Hills Zen temple. The 9th prince sneered beside me, still offering the Xie family as a betrothal gift. Does my Lanling Xiao clan, now a top-tier aristocratic family, lack wealth? I casually plucked a peach blossom and brought it to my nose for a gentle sniff. Xiao Jiulang swiftly turned and snatched the peach blossom from my hand, grumbling, You little lady, your heart is far too carefree. That Xie Qilang has ruined his own reputation. Are you moved by him again? I noticed that your father's attitude toward the Xie family has improved quite a bit lately. You had me quietly send the Lin family out of the capital. Shana, tell me the truth. Have you softened your heart toward Xie Qi? I glanced at him and indeed saw the unease in the young man's eyes. He always acts so arrogant in front of others, yet he never seems confident when facing me. But this person is truly good. When I first broke off the engagement, I couldn't eat or drink, so he took me hunting and fishing, showed me the hardships of the common people, and taught me the importance of life. At the Langya ancestral land, when I was scorned and condemned by the clan, he, as the 9th prince of the Xiao family, ordered the clan to treat me well and assured them that one day he would bring me back to the capital in glory. During the Huainan flood, when I was surrounded by disaster victims, he rescued me from the midst of thousands. In the Jizhou snow disaster, when I went with the officials to dig people out of the mountains and rolled down the slope, it was he who found me in the freezing snow. Liangzhu was under siege, and I was entrusted by my father's good friend, the governor of Liangzhu, to seek reinforcements. It was Xiao Jiulang who resolutely accompanied me, guiding me through the vast desert. After healing from the heartbreak, I no longer wished to hold him back, and time and again, I willfully pushed him away, yet, each time, He stubbornly caught up and rescued me from peril. With my hands behind my back and a smile in my eyes, I asked, Xiao Zhoulang, I've thought it over and over, but I never saw you before I left the capital. When exactly did you start liking me? His face flushed red as he nervously said, What are you talking about? What liking? I don't know anything about that. I raised an eyebrow. Really, you don't know? I thought some people had found out about my accident and dropped everything to chase after me in the capital. TSK. I was moved for nothing. I even had my father go to the palace to accept the emperor's marriage arrangement. I need to hurry back and stop him. I leisurely walked away. Xiao Zhoulang quickly caught up, walking by my side like a large dog. What arranged marriage? Shana, explain clearly. Is it the marriage between you and me? You agreed. You finally agreed. And what do you mean by moved in vain? Wang Shan, stop right there and explain yourself. Were you truly moved because I chased you all the way to the capital? More moved than when you found out that Xie Qilang had ruined his own reputation? I didn't answer him, but my steps felt incredibly light. That spring, on the official road, a young man in fluttering red robes rode his horse sideways, blocking my carriage. I thought I had encountered a vicious bandit. But it turned out to be an old acquaintance from the capital. After 3 years of mutual support, we have now returned to the capital. It's just the right time of spring. How can one not be moved? The last time I saw Xie Qilang was when I personally went to the Xie family to announce the good news. The emperor has already issued an edict, granting me and Xiao Zhoulang to be married next spring. Xie Qilang's face was filled with shock, no longer maintaining his previous calm and composure. I must personally deliver this final blow to avoid any regrets. Brother Xie, my earlier pretense of friendliness was only to stir your guilt and make you let your guard down. I originally intended to take half of your Xie family's fortune as repayment for your refusal to marry me back then. But since you've willingly offered half of your assets, it saves me the trouble. Xie Qilang, our fate ends in this life. Let us not meet again in the future. I turned around, and Xie Qilang, his eyes wide with fury, chased after me. Shan, don't even think about marrying someone else. You cannot escape, nor can you sever this bond. Do not even dream of it. But was stopped by the imperial guards. Xie Qilang's voice gradually lowered, filled with endless pleading. Asha, don't be so heartless. My heart truly aches. Please help me. He knew that the Xie family would not allow him to confront the royal family. The Xie family cannot, and neither can the aristocratic families. I slowly walked out of the main residence of the Xie family. The memories of my childhood sweetheart in my mind like a book, torn page by my own hands. The little brother who helped me up when I fell at the age of 3, the little teacher who frowned and taught me to write at the age of 5, the little boy who carved a peachwood hairpin for me with his own hands when I was 7, the young man who swore to the heavens that he would treat me well for a lifetime when I was 12, and the young master of the Xie family, who trampled my pride underfoot when I was 15. From now on, all of them will have nothing to do with me. Outside the Xie residence, the young man in red waited impatiently by the carriage, as if he were about to storm into the Xie residence at any moment. When he saw me, he breathed a sigh of relief and reached out his hand to me. Hurry, there's still time. I'll take you for a ride outside the city. I smiled and placed my hand in his palm. Xiao Zhoulang, when exactly did you start liking me? You little girl, how can you be so shameless? When exactly was it? I tried to think, but I couldn't recall. So what did you do? I told you myself years ago at the spring banquet. You stumbled in the peach grove. I kindly helped you up, but you soaked my sleeve with your tears. From that moment on, I couldn't forget you. When spring returns to our hometown, we shall meet again at the mountain peak. That's really good. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. At the coming-of-age banquet, an unfamiliar maid rushed in to report in a panic. Third Miss Shunlingen is about to be beaten to death. I remained expressionless, a mere servant. If he dies, so be it. She stared wide-eyed, as if she hadn't expected me to be so heartless. But you used to care about him the most. Second Miss Xuening deliberately exaggerated. Third sister, go take a look quickly. How unlucky it is that someone died today. I watched this clumsy act between the master and servant with a cold eye. How could I not know that Xue Ning was deliberately provoking me, trying to make me abandon everyone to save Shenlingen, so that I would be publicly humiliated and punished by father. Shenlingen is a handsome servant, and on ordinary days, I could indulge him, but this time, I cannot oblige. The sixth young lady, Xue Li, with grease still at the corner of her mouth, suddenly shouted loudly, "Who died?" Aunt Shu hurriedly covered her mouth. "Master, children's words carry no harm." Father remained silent, his expression stern. The first wife said, "What is all this commotion about?" The maid panicked and blurted out, "I was just trying to do the right thing by reporting to third miss that Shenlingen is about to be beaten to death." As soon as that person's name was spoken, the room fell into complete silence. A newly arrived concubine sneered, "Oh, isn't Shenlingen the male favorite who warms third miss's bed?" The head wife was furious. "How dare you? How can you speak such nonsense?" The two youngest girls had their ears quickly covered by their respective aunts. I slowly began to speak. "It's common for servants to fight. If someone truly dies, father will decide the matter. With all this commotion, you've delayed my coming-of-age ceremony. Who put you up to this?" She knelt on the ground, trembling like a sieve, suddenly glanced up at the banquet, then quickly lowered her head, keeping her mouth shut. This servant spoke out of turn. "Please punish me, General." I suddenly smiled and said softly, "So it's the second young lady." She abruptly looked up, urgently defending herself. "It's not the second young lady." Xue Ning stood up so abruptly that he nearly overturned the dining table, flustered as he roared, "Wretched servant, truly full of lies. Drag her away, drag her away." The first lady's face turned ashen as she called out to her, "Ninga." Xue Ning ran sobbing to the first lady's side, looking pitiful and delicate as she cried, "That wretched maid is slandering me. Ninga knows nothing about this." Even the confused new concubine could now grasp the situation. Her earlier gloom vanished, replaced by a faint, amused smile playing on her lips as she watched the drama unfold. Father stood up and roared, "You insolent wretch! Drag her out and give her 30 lashes with the rod." The maid, knowing she had no chance to survive, cried out toward the head of the room. It was clearly the second young lady who ordered me. Before she could finish her words, my father's spear pierced through the air, impaling her frail body. Blood splattered all over me. Screams erupted throughout the banquet. Father kicked over the dining table in anger and stormed out of the feast. Xue Ning hid in the arms of the first wife, her tearful eyes gleaming with a sly smile, showing no trace of the panic from moments before. After this incident, who still cared about the coming-of-age ceremony? The seat at the head of the table was empty, and several concubines with children, using the excuse that their little ones couldn't bear the sight of blood, also slipped away shamefacedly. The eldest young lady, Xue Yun, came over with her maid and handed me a clean handkerchief. "I apologize on behalf of my second sister. She is young and ignorant, and has always been willful. Please do not take it to heart." As she spoke, she bowed in apology to me. I restrained my temper and spoke to her gently and reasonably. "You needn't be like this, elder sister. You two sisters share the same mother, and as an outsider, I naturally don't understand the deep bond between you. But when elder sister says she is young and ignorant, I don't quite agree. Didn't second sister just hold her coming-of-age ceremony last month?" The high-ranking nobles who attended that day and the rare treasures they gifted nearly dazzled my eyes. As the legitimate eldest daughter, Xue Yun remained composed in the face of honor or disgrace, clearly understanding what mattered most. She wiped away the blood droplets from my eyelashes. "If you don't mind, sister, let me serve as the principal officiant, with Aunt Wan as the assistant, to complete your coming-of-age ceremony. Would that be acceptable?" Aunt Wan, who had been about to slip away, returned with a fallen face and forced a smile. "Everything is as the young lady arranges." The bodies on the ground had already been carried away, and maids knelt on the floor, washing away the bloodstains. The air was thick with a foul, bloody stench. Several pairs of eyes were fixed on me, brimming with curiosity and amusement, but I was determined to spoil the mood. I withdrew my hand from Xue Yun's loose grip and said, "Thank you, elder sister, for your thoughtful consideration. But this filthy place is hardly worthy of hosting my coming-of-age ceremony. Qing Luan brought Shenlingen inside. I took a sip of hot tea and said coldly, "Take it off." He skillfully removed his coarse outer garment, revealing a lean upper body covered in bruises. I scolded him. "Don't you know how to fight back?" He stammered. "I did." I ignored his flushed ears and beckoned him to kneel closer. He hesitated for a moment before slowly crawling over on his knees. I lifted my leg and pressed the tip of my shoe against the scar above his abdomen, the one he got while saving Xuening. Shenlingen had ambition, but unfortunately, he used it in the wrong place. And it wasn't grand enough. I am the daughter of a concubine, while Xuening is the legitimate daughter. He knew very well whom to choose. But even after taking this blow and earning Xuening's attention, I still couldn't gain my father's approval. Old wounds should no longer ache. But he blushed, his forehead beaded with fine sweat. "Today, Xuening ruined my coming-of-age ceremony, so it's only right that you suffer a bit more." I laughed. "Does it hurt?" He turned his head away. His breathing unsteady, his entire body flushed red, his eyes dark and unfathomable, his voice hoarse, answering third miss. "It doesn't hurt." Shenlingen was the one I brought back from the street corner in exchange for a candied hawthorn when I was a child, because he was good-looking. Actually, the human trafficker was unwilling, but when he saw the sword-bearing guards from the general's mansion following me, he had no choice but to compromise. My father was granted an official position through hereditary privilege, but after all these years, he still had no remarkable military achievements to his name. Though he held military power, he had no opportunity to put it to use, indulging in debauchery, surrounded by a crowd of wives and concubines, arrogant and domineering, yet utterly useless. Were it not for the constraints of the law, there would be more than one wife and 8 concubines in the household. What is most lamentable is that there are no sons in the household. Therefore, when I brought someone back to the residence back then, he did not try to dissuade me. I am the young lady, and Shenlingen is the servant. Different paths lead to the same destination, but I insist on giving him a chance to climb up. I allow him to attend classes as an observer and practice martial arts and swordsmanship with me. I want him to stand by my side, with a status that can protect me. A secret decree has been issued from the court. The state preceptor observed celestial phenomena at night and detected unusual movements in the sky above the southern part of the capital. To safeguard the royal lineage and the state, it is decreed that the Xue family of the general's manor in the southern part of the city, along with other prominent families, shall each send one son to the palace to assist the state preceptor, upon the completion of the designated period. Honors and recognition will be bestowed. The deadline is within 7 days. By the time Shenlingen entered, the secret letter had already turned to ashes. I carefully traced the contours of his brows and eyes with my fingertips. Like distant mountains painted in dark hues, his long eyelashes tremble intensely. Yet he still insists on meeting my gaze. I slowly open my mouth and ask, "Shenlingen, would you like to enter the palace?" His eyes widen abruptly, sparkling with life. Yet he still evades my question. Third miss. "This servant does not understand what you mean." I took a step forward and nestled into his embrace. Shenlingen's body stiffened. The embrace was rigid and uncomfortable, far from warm. I whispered, "Shenlingen, if you ever rise to greatness, don't you dare forget me." Things are progressing more smoothly than expected. Father detests the mention of having no heir the most, and the new concubine's face was swollen for half a month. I know exactly why he is so agitated. The 7-day deadline is approaching. Going with the flow, I introduced Shenlingen to my father. He had searched outside for over a dozen young maidens, but their appearances and knowledge were all unsatisfactory. Since they were entering the palace under the name of the general's manor, they naturally needed to possess some noble grace and must not be laughed at by others. Shenlingen arrived late. 2 days later, Qingwan invited him in and called out, "Young master." Shenlingen was dressed in simple, plain white robes, his dark hair tied up, standing tall and graceful, with a refined and jade-like demeanor. He performed the official salute towards me with a dignified posture. Truly, he carried the demeanor of a noble and prestigious family. I sneered and said, "It should be I who salutes my sworn brother. How has it been reversed?" His expression was as usual, a pair of dark eyes fixed on me, his mood shifting between light and shadow. I asked him, "Did father have you recite from memory? What did you recite?" He replied, "The 1,000-character classic." I covered my face and laughed out loud. Father was a military man. The only thing he could recite was the 1,000-character classic. "What else?" he said. "He sent Deputy General Cheng to spar with me." I said, "All right, then let's go." Shenlingen did not move and still stared at me intently, as if he had something to say. I spoke for him, without any genuine emotion. "You can go with peace of mind. I'll take good care of Xuening for you." His brow twitched slightly, as if in anger, and just as he reached out to touch me, Qinghuan's voice sounded from outside the door. "Miss, the time has come. Please ask the young master to move to the front hall." After the person left, Qinghuan presented a wooden hairpin with intricate patterns, no less exquisite than those from the silver shop. I held it in my hand, playing with it, and instructed her to go to the silver shop and have gold and silver hairpins made according to the design to give to Xuening. Qinghuan was puzzled but complied. A few days later, I asked her, "How did second miss react?" Qinghuan helped me grind the ink. Second miss complained a lot, but she still accepted it. I couldn't hold back my laughter, and my handwriting became all crooked. Shenlingen had been away for 5 years, when he returned home at the age of 20. He was already the Tanhua scholar personally appointed by the emperor. The entire Shui household was filled with joy, decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and firecrackers were set off everywhere. Granted an imperial parade, he wore a grand crimson python robe, rode a golden-saddled horse with a red manet, and was surrounded by a bustling entourage, exuding an extraordinary presence. After Qinghuan finished her report, she tentatively asked, "Miss, aren't you going to see the excitement?" I paused my hand on the abacus and scolded her. "Haven't you ever seen a Tanhua before?" She wisely kept quiet. Outside, it was noisy and chaotic. Qinghuan went out as instructed and returned a moment later. "Miss, several old ladies said that young Master Shen has passed the imperial examination and have come to ask for celebratory money." I laughed. Shenlingen has passed the imperial examination, but what does that have to do with the Shui residence? Qinghuan knew she couldn't respond in such a manner, so she quietly stood by my side. I tossed aside the account book and rubbed my forehead. "Just tell them to wait until young Master Shen returns to the residence and decides for himself." Qinghuan went to deliver the reply. "It has been 4 years since Miss Shui the eldest married and left the mansion. Miss Shui the second, being spoiled and lacking in knowledge, could only say, 'Let's follow the precedent.' When asked to manage the accounts for a month, the servants engaged in fraudulent practices, and silver flowed like water into their pockets. When questioned about it, they dismissed it as a trivial matter, saying it was of no consequence. The lady of the house was so infuriated that she suffered from chest tightness and shortness of breath all day. Her health is not good. And over the years she had intended to teach the young ladies of the household. The 4th young lady has not yet come of age, and the other 2 are still children. Since she was unwilling, she had no choice but to leave it to me, managing accounts, overseeing shops and fields, and handling social etiquette. She attended to every detail meticulously. Now, aside from my father, every matter concerning the 1,000 or so people in the Shui household must be referred to me. The greetings. "Third young lady, I certainly deserve it." Qinghuan returned in a fluster, her face slightly panicked. "Miss, young Master Shen passed by our gate without stopping, and instead turned his horse around and left." I fiddled with the wooden hairpin, my expression calm. "Didn't I just say? Shenlingen's success in the imperial exams has nothing to do with the Shui residence." The news that Shenlingen has established his own residence spread throughout the Shui residence in less than 2 hours. Father flared up in anger, shouting, "Look at the fine man you chose. Now that he's become a top scholar, how could he possibly remember the favors the Shui residence once bestowed upon him? An ungrateful wretch, a disgrace to my name, Shui Jin." I put down the teacup and humbly bowed. Father's lesson is right. Xuening walked right into the line of fire. "Young Master Shen is not that kind of person. There must be some misunderstanding." Father slammed the table angrily, shattering the teacup. Xuening's legs went weak, and her eyes welled up with tears. Father pointed at her. Well, Xuening, no wonder you've never been satisfied with any of the suitors introduced to you over the years, so you've been waiting for this boy. Xuening weakly defended herself. I have not. She shifted the blame. Why was third sister allowed to keep him in her courtyard before, but now when I speak up for fairness, father gets so angry? Is it just because third sister is close to the Empress Dowager? Father slammed the table in fury. How dare you? As the matter remained at a stalemate, a servant came to report that Shenlingen had sent gifts, which had already been moved to the front courtyard, and requested everyone to proceed there for inspection. The group, with varied expressions, made their way to the front courtyard. There was no small quantity of jewelry, fine silks, gold leaf, and lacquerware. Xuening, who was never good at reading the room, chased after someone and asked, "Why didn't young Master Shen come in person?" Scolded sternly by his father, I stepped forward to take the gift list, exchanged some polite pleasantries, sent the visitor away, and had the servants carry the items into the storeroom first. Although his father sneered, his expression softened somewhat. If I ever see him, I will discipline him properly and make him understand the principles of filial piety and etiquette. I inwardly scoffed, but outwardly offered a different argument. Father, Mr. Shen is currently a favorite of the emperor. We must not act rashly, we should respond with courtesy. He waved his hand dismissively. A mere youngster, not worth mentioning. He added, as for the matter of returning the gift, you are fully in charge, there is no need to consult me. 3 days later, I paid a visit to his residence. Shenlingen's chosen residence is quite impressive. Its landscaping and design are on par with those of a second-rank official's mansion. It's just a bit old. The butler led me to the study. Shenlingen stood by the shelf, holding a scroll, leaning slightly forward, dressed in luxurious robes and a jade crown. His elegance was unparalleled. He turned around and looked up, his eyes like an autumn pond reflecting the moon, clear and deep, yet with a hidden sharpness. It's been years since we last met. His features have matured, yet he remains strikingly handsome, truly worthy of being the top scholar handpicked by the emperor. As silent as a cicada in cold weather, now he doesn't have to kneel to me, but I won't bow to him either. In the end, I was the first to give in. Sighing, Shen, the top scholar, is holding the book upside down. He looked embarrassed and hurriedly lowered his head to check. I sneered and picked up the hot tea on the table. This tea is terribly astringent. Could it be that you're short on money? Shen, you didn't even bring a maid along the way, and the pond in the courtyard has no water. He did not deny it. Yes. I turned to look at him, his expression showing no hint of apology. I'm truly sorry. I thought the Tanhua scholar wouldn't lack such mundane things. Today, as a return gift, the Xue family presented weapons, all 18 types of weapons. The courtesy has been returned, and I am ready to leave. Shenlingen finally made a move, tugging at my sleeve with a gloomy look in his eyes. In 3 days, at the Tanhua banquet, the Empress Dowager intends to arrange a marriage. The so-called Tanhua banquet is merely a pretext for these noble families to marry off their daughters. This year, the titles of Zhuangyuan and Tanhua both fell to Shenlingen alone, with 1 Bangyang and 8 Jinsha from the second rank, making a total of 10 attendees at the banquet. There are far more than 10 daughters of court officials who have reached marriageable age but have not yet been married off. Xuening, dressed in her finest attire, drew frequent glances and hushed whispers as soon as she took her seat. She held her head high, more eye-catching than the peacock her father had once hunted. It was only in the latter half of the banquet that the Emperor and the Empress Dowager made their appearance, receiving the homage of hundreds, all in a harmonious and joyful atmosphere. I was too far away to clearly see the face of the person seated at the head, but I could perceive an aura of grace, nobility, and imperial majesty. It all began when I was 10 years old. By chance, I entered the palace and accidentally bumped into a palace servant in the rear garden, thanks to the Empress's grace. I was spared from punishment. The Grand Astrologer said that I was a person of noble destiny, destined for great achievements in the future. The Empress was overjoyed and bestowed rewards upon me, instructing the Xue family to ensure I was never mistreated. At 20, returning to the palace, I fear the Empress Dowager no longer remembers me. I looked up and realized Shenlingen had left his seat at some point. I also rose to refresh myself and shake off the wine's effects. After all these years away from this place of intrigue, I had actually gotten lost. In a moment of confusion, I saw two figures struggling by the corridor across the pond. Just as I was about to call out, one of them was pushed into the water, flailing about. In the urgency of the moment, I leaped into the water and swam toward the gradually sinking figure on the opposite shore, but someone was faster than me. Before I could even touch the hem of the drowning woman's skirt, she had already been pulled out and surfaced. I was outmatched. The tight and intricate court attire became even heavier after absorbing water, and I was utterly exhausted. Unfortunately, heaven had no intention of letting me perish. That person also happened to save me. I clung to the scattered rocks by the shore, my body floating on the water's surface, gasping for breath. Shenlingen helped the person ashore and then pulled me up. In the vast and imposing imperial palace, there were only the three of us here. The person who had been pushing and shoving earlier was nowhere to be seen. I grabbed Shenlingen and coughed as I spoke. Look at the phoenix embroidery on her clothes. It must be that little princess. He was extremely calm. Yes, I have seen her in the palace. I suddenly understood. The top scholar saving the drowning princess should have been a beautiful story. But now, I have messed it up. Seeing my troubled expression, he comforted me. Don't worry. I take full responsibility. As soon as the words fell, the clang of weapons surged like a stampede of 10,000 horses, and the imperial guards completely surrounded us. When I saw the Empress Dowager standing among them, the color drained from my head to my toes. The two of us knelt on the ground, with blades pressed directly against our necks. In the warm spring of March, the ground was cold and the wind was biting. I'm trembling uncontrollably. The Empress Dowager sat on the phoenix throne, her gaze sharp and imposing. Perhaps it was the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, or maybe an entire hour. My clothes were already half dry when the damned imperial physician finally arrived, announcing to the Empress Dowager that the princess was out of danger. The tense, confrontational atmosphere had not dissipated, until the eunuch shouted in a shrill voice, "The emperor has arrived." Shenlingen suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. The emperor ordered the two of us to be taken away separately. In the resplendent hall, the Empress Dowager and the emperor sat together, their authority even more imposing. The Empress Dowager commanded, "Lift your head." I slowly raised my head, my face pale and disheveled, but she didn't seem to recognize me. I tried to steady my voice and said, "I am the third daughter of General Shuejin, and my name is Shueji." Upon hearing this, the Empress Dowager's expression froze as she stared at my face. A delicate yet hoarse voice rang in my ears. "Mother, brother, please do not trouble Miss Shue. It was she and Lord Shen who worked together to save me." The little princess ran in. I looked up again. The Empress Dowager, who had just been stern-faced, now looked kindly, and even the emperor gazed at his sister with tender affection. This scene felt like a thorn, piercing my heart. Shenlingen entered and knelt beside me. The emperor asked him what reward he desired. The Empress Dowager intended to arrange for him to marry the princess. The emperor declined the matter, citing the princess's young age. He also mentioned that Lord Shen already had someone in his heart and that it would be wrong to force him. I was in a daze and could not hear clearly. The Empress Dowager looked displeased but said, "There's no time like the present," and decided to bestow the marriage that very day. Shenlingen bowed in gratitude for the Empress Dowager's kindness, stating that he had no interest in romantic affairs and wished to dedicate himself wholeheartedly to the nation. I couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Such a rigid man now knew how to spout such high-sounding nonsense. But the emperor loved hearing it and laughed heartily, praising his loyal minister. The Empress Dowager's face was as dark as charcoal. It wasn't until the Empress Dowager suddenly exclaimed, "Absolutely not," that my thoughts were pulled back. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. Granting Shueji the title of princess is no small matter. I fear she may not be able to bear such imperial favor," the emperor said in a deep voice. "My word is final." I tactfully declined, using my humble background as an excuse. Claiming I was unworthy of the title of princess, the Empress Dowager still refused to relent. the emperor angrily said. Has the Empress Dowager forgotten? 10 years ago. The state preceptor openly stated that Miss Shui was a noble person. I still remember how delighted the Empress Dowager was back then. Today, she has saved the princess, so she certainly deserves the title of princess. The Empress Dowager had no words to refute and could only clench the phoenix throne with her delicate, jade-like hands. He immediately issued an edict, bestowing upon Shuiji the title of Princess of Yangcheng and granting her 1,000 taels of gold and silver. I kowtowed and knelt in gratitude for the emperor's gracious favor. But, Your Majesty the Empress Dowager, why is there fear in your eyes? With no fiefdom and no real power, the empty title of princess is only enough to intimidate the noble ladies of the capital, especially Xuening, who both fears and hates me. I have no mind to care about her. The heavy trivial matters in the household are almost suffocating me, before the 8th concubine's body is even cold. Father is already making arrangements to marry a new concubine. The youngest 6th sister in the household is already 10 years old, not to mention a son. Not even a girl has been born in all these years. He simply refused to believe it. On the day of the Tanhua banquet, the emperor's attitude toward the Empress Dowager, due to my being granted the title of princess, truly surprised me. It is widely rumored among the people that the Empress Dowager holds power from behind the curtain. And the young emperor is merely a puppet, devoid of authority and influence. The bewitching empress has successively charmed the grand preceptor and the general who guards the nation, thereby securing her influence in the court and maintaining her position on the throne for many years. Not at all. The emperor was no longer that ignorant child who could be manipulated at will. The Empress Dowager, in the name of the princess, invited me to the palace to admire the flowers. She had shed her usual stern demeanor and was now putting on a show of mother-daughter affection. The princess called me elder sister, and if we were to follow that logic, wouldn't I be the Empress Dowager's adopted daughter? But I knew that the drinker's heart is not in the cup. One day, an envoy from Qiangwu entered the court and presented a state letter, expressing a desire to form a marriage alliance and establish friendly relations. It's nothing but a pretense of a marriage alliance to deceive our great Luan into marrying off a daughter. The royal family only has one young princess who just turned 16. But now, there's me, the widely known county princess Shuiji, before I could even make contact with the one in the palace. News of Shunlingen's intention to marry the third daughter of the Shui family had already spread throughout the capital. Then I knew the marriage alliance was real. They are all spineless cowards. When the late emperor ascended the throne, he prioritized military affairs over civil administration. He personally led the imperial army to repeatedly defeat the Qiangwu cavalry and repel countless foreign invaders. Unexpectedly, the rebels took advantage of the palace's weakened defenses, led their forces to breach the city gates, slaughtered the palace staff, and seized the imperial capital. At that time, the Empress Dowager, who was still the empress, and the young emperor were forced to wander among the common people for as long as 2 years. The late emperor returned to the capital and ordered a desperate search for his wife and children, while simultaneously purging the court of corrupt officials. In just 4 years, he had consolidated all power in the capital. By then, however, there were very few generals left who were truly capable of leading troops into battle, and the Guardian General was stationed at the border year-round. Instead, it was my father who seized the opportunity, gaining fame and merit without expending any effort. After resolving internal conflicts, the late emperor led his troops to deliver the final blow to the Qiangwu tribe. However, he contracted tuberculosis during the expedition, and a generation of emperors was hastily dethroned. Now that the Great Luan has been at peace for 10 years, Jiangwu has been building up his strength and is likely to provoke again. Thus, he tested the waters with a marriage alliance. My father summoned me to the council hall for a detailed discussion and asked me what I thought about Shunlingen's marriage proposal. I asked my father in return, "Are you willing to hand over your title and military power to a man from another family?" Mentioning this, he was filled with remorse. "Of course I don't want to, but heaven is punishing me, leaving me, Shui Jin, without an heir." I knelt down, my blood surging. Shuiji is willing to become the successor of the Shui family. Since father is unwilling to bestow it upon an outsider, why not grant it to your daughter? Father looked bewildered. As if he was seeing me for the first time, I continued, I heard that my eldest sister has given birth to another daughter. He sighed with melancholy, then burst into laughter. My son. Rise. Women serving as officials is still acceptable. Women joining the military, however, are rare exceptions. Dressed in full military attire, her heroic bearing was no less impressive than that of any man. In the military tent, I met my childhood martial arts instructor. His name was Qingji, and he was my mentor. He taught me the ways of scholarship and the arts of war, the 6 secret teachings and the 3 strategies. There was nothing he did not know, yet now, confined to this small tent, his talents are wasted on trivial tasks. He stroked his beard and glanced at me disdainfully. All show, no substance. I dared not voice any complaint. Bowing respectfully, I stepped aside and stood in attendance. He threw a long spear at me. Care to spar with an old man? How could I possibly refuse? After a few exchanges, his expression darkened. Neglecting your studies brings shame to your master's name. I tightened my grip on the spear in my hand and held back no longer. Striking with lethal precision in every move, he laughed heartily. That's perfect. Qingji is a rather unconventional teacher who loves drinking, showing off his spear skills, laughs whenever he feels like it, and doesn't bother with trivial formalities. Unfortunately, I can't hold my liquor after just 2 cups. I get so dizzy I can't tell which way is north. He asked me, why did you join the army? I muttered, to stay alive. He sneered, is the military camp safer than the Shui residence? I said, no one in the residence can protect me. Qingji took a sip of wine. What about that Kidshan? I forced myself to lift my head. He is now a favorite of the emperor. He poured me another drink, breaking the rules. Even he can't protect you. I remained silent and drank in frustration. At 6 years old, I met Shenlingen at a street corner and tricked him into coming home with me. At the age of 8, my father finally learned that there was a young lady named Shuiji in the household. The concubine Shen, who took care of me, was mute. She knelt and begged the head wife to hire a tutor for me as well, but the head wife sent me to sit in on lessons, where I didn't even know how to hold a brush. Xuening discovered me, grabbed me by the ear, and dragged me into the study hall, making all the noble girls laugh at me. I ran back to the mansion and told Shenlingen to teach Xuening a lesson for me. Shenlingen returned covered in wounds. I didn't feel sorry for him, because that was exactly why I had bought him. He was meant to protect me. At the age of 10, I entered the palace under the Empress's protection. Even the Shui family dared not neglect me. My clothing, food, housing, travel, salary, and monthly allowance were all on par with those of a legitimate daughter. My father believed I was destined to become a consort in the palace, so I was trained in both martial and literary arts, and etiquette and law were not to be overlooked. I am living a good life. Xuening couldn't do anything about me, so she turned her spearhead toward Shenlingen, which was exactly what I wanted. At 13, a secret letter from the palace broke the calm surface of the water. I intended to leave the Shui residence but didn't want to marry hastily. At 15, when the second secret letter arrived, I sent Shenlingen into the palace, using him as a wager. At 20, Shenlingen returned with fame and success. But if the emperor were to use me for a political marriage, how could he possibly protect me? For these 20 years, everything I have done was merely to fight for a chance at life. While I was leading a ragtag group to clear out the mountain bandits outside the city, Shenlingen had already been promoted to an imperial guard. Staying by the emperor's side, my esteemed teacher is right. No matter how many books you read, it's all just empty talk. Among the current external threats, aside from the Qiangwu tribe, who are eyeing us with hostile intentions, the rest are nothing but small fries, afraid that the fire might burn them. So they keep their heads down. The capital has been softened by the fine wines and cosmetics of the wealthy, lost in luxury and extravagance, with a surface appearance of peace and prosperity. Cut open the facade, and all you find is rotten flesh, a bunch of worthless cowards who can't be helped. Natural disasters and heavy taxes plague the land. Where there are people, there is conflict. I led 1,000 elite soldiers, with Qingji by my side, marching north to fight the pirates and reclaim the rebel forces. Those who surrender will be treated well, those who resist will be killed. I ate and lived with the soldiers, went through life and death together, and finally gained some prestige. But I knew that what they obeyed was that cold military token, not me, a woman. Qingji laughed at me. Does the princess intend to lead your private army all the way to the border? I only smiled without saying a word. Seeing me like this, Qingji understood and sighed. I, as your teacher, have poor eyesight. I never realized you had such lofty ambitions. I quickly spoke up. Master, do not belittle yourself. In the past, I only wanted to survive and never thought about the people of the world. Over the past 6 months, as I journeyed along, I have seen many unfortunate souls and have gradually begun to empathize with the common people. The feeling of having the heart but lacking the strength is truly this bitter. Unfortunately, I am not a natural at leading troops into battle. I have suffered setbacks, endured injuries, and even nearly had my eye poked out by a 5-year-old child. Qingji stomped his feet in anger. How come you've grown kinder as you've gotten older? I touched the wound under my eye and said calmly, I really hope it doesn't leave a scar, or my mother might not recognize me. He stopped jumping and stared at my face in silence. Many letters arrived from the capital, but not a single one mentioned the matter of the marriage alliance. I felt puzzled. The further north I went, the longer it took for letters to be exchanged. Most of the letters were from Qingwan and Shui-Wn. When I left home, I entrusted the Shui residence to her care and left Qingwan and 8 elderly women to assist her. Seeing Shui-Wan's increasingly neat handwriting and hearing Qingwan's praise for her gave me a sense of maternal pride. Shenlingen also sent a letter, just a few short words, not even minding the waste of manpower. When will you return? Is everything well? Where have you reached now? I only know how to ask him for money. Maintaining an army costs far more than supporting the Shui residence. These half-grown boys are practically eating me out of house and home. Qingji asked me, Your Highness, do you still plan to head further north? Winter will set in next month, and the bitter cold up north is more than ordinary people can withstand. I pondered. Winter has come. Does that mean war is imminent as well? The Qiangwu territory is fertile, but for most of the year, it is bitterly cold, making farming impossible. Livestock freeze to death or suffer frostbite. Returning means death, and going to war also means death. Why not take a chance and fight? Qingji, reeking of alcohol, spoke treasonous words. If the princess were born into the royal family, she would surely be a great ruler. I whispered, my mentor is drunk. Before any news of a marriage alliance arrived, word of Qiangwu's invasion reached the camp first. The intercepted military dispatch was presented. My side is not a regular army. It's even our first time facing a real battlefield. Qingji asked me, Princess, do you still want to fight? I handed the dispatch to him. No, we're going to deliver supplies. This letter was written by Wei Han, the garrison commander of Yuju City. The letter states that due to heavy snowfall, the Qiong people took advantage of the situation to attack. Thousands of soldiers are trapped in the city, and with insufficient provisions, they can only hold out for 7 more days. The closest to Yuju City is our stationed city, Ya City, located outside. However, this letter has long passed its deadline. Along our journey, we did not encounter any supply convoy for the army. I fear there is something strange happening within the city. That night, Qingji and I, along with 20 elite soldiers, launched a surprise attack on the city tower. We effortlessly found the city lord, who was fast asleep. This man was frail and weak, lacking any semblance of a commander's demeanor. At the sight of swords and blades, he was so terrified that he nearly lost control of his bladder. We captured him without the slightest effort. Upon questioning, we learned that his father had been the true city lord, who had passed away the previous month, leaving the position to him. He had never even held a blade before, and a single threatening letter from the Qiong people was enough to intimidate him into not daring to send troops for rescue. We tied him up, stocked up on food from his family's grain store, and rode at full speed toward Yuju City. I left Qingji behind and took only 100 cavalry with me. I also had him write a letter to inform the capital of the situation. If I do not return within 10 days, then come looking for me. The group braved the wind and snow, pushing countless horses to exhaustion, and finally arrived at Yuju City 3 days later at the fastest possible speed. However, before we could even approach the west gate, we were surrounded by a group of people. War horses neighed, and weapons clanged. Someone cried out in terror, "It's the Qiangwu people!" A false alarm. Wei Han, having waited in vain for provisions and reinforcements, had no choice but to write again to Meng Zhongjiang at the border for help. Even with troops dispatched, it would take at least 7 days to arrive. With the soldiers and civilians in the city starving, he had no choice but to take a risk, disguised in Qiangwu attire. He went out to assess the enemy's situation. I explained the reason to him. The Lord of Yaqing is as timid as a mouse and refused to send reinforcements. Wei Han burst into a furious tirade after hearing the news. I delivered the provisions and prepared to leave with my men. A scout suddenly reported, "General, reinforcements have been spotted 20 li from the main gate, bearing the Meng family banner." Wei Han was overjoyed. "Excellent. Pass the order, immediately rally the entire army and engage the enemy head-on. We will join forces with the Meng family army to attack from both sides." The soldier went down to deliver the order. He then turned and called out to me, "Don't you leave either. Once we win this battle, we'll have a proper feast." Now, leaving is probably not an easy matter, so I had no choice but to follow Wei Han into the city. With General Meng Zhongjiang, the guardian of the nation, here, there is hardly a battle we cannot win. By the time everything was settled, it was already the second day. I finally met this renowned great general. He was weathered, with strands of white hair peeking out from under his helmet, as if dusted with snow. Despite being around the same age as my father, he looked so worn and aged. Perhaps my gaze was too intense. Meng Zhongjiang looked up from the clinking wine cups. I was clad in armor, without any adornment, and a closer look would reveal that I was a woman. As he moved, his armor clanked loudly. "There's actually a woman serving as an officer in the army." I saluted him with a man's bow and called out, "General Meng." He asked, "Whose daughter are you?" I answered truthfully, "My father is Xue Jin." He was taken aback. The Xue Jin from the capital, Wei Hanshu, who had likely also met my father, exclaimed in surprise, "How could Xue Jin have a daughter like you?" I smiled bitterly. Meng Zhongjiang asked again, "How did the troops from the capital end up at my border?" I sensed the pressure in his tone and explained the reason clearly. He suddenly burst into laughter. "Good. You have courage. I just wonder if the one in the imperial palace will let you atone for your crimes with merit." I understood his meaning, capturing the rebels and escorting the provisions. I could only hope so. That day, Meng Zhongjiang led his troops to Ya City to deal with the rebels. 10 days later, Qingji followed the team back to Yuju City with the remaining people. They seemed like old acquaintances, but they just didn't get along well. Indeed, someone as serious as Meng Zhongjiang would surely find Qingji frivolous and boastful. The snow grew deeper in the harsh winter, making it difficult to return to the capital. No news came from the capital either. Qingji and I decided to follow Meng Zhongjiang to the border. Life at the frontier passed in a flash, and by May of the following year, new sprouts finally emerged from the ground. Meng Zhongjiang taught me military strategy, swordsmanship, and took me on campaigns. Snow-capped mountains, glacier, war horses, and wild beasts. Everything was a scene of freedom. Yet brutal. I have witnessed real battlefields. Killed Qiong tribesmen, slaughtered sheep, hunted white wolves, and even helped a woman give birth when she collapsed in the snow. Qingji said my face had changed, from a noble lady of the capital to a wild woman of the frontier. It feels as if I was born to be here. I bid farewell to General Meng, to those soldiers with cold faces but warm hearts, and to the simple yet enthusiastic women. Though it had only been half a year, it felt as if half a lifetime had passed. A letter arrived from the capital urging me to return quickly, as something had happened at home. In July, I returned to the capital. The capital remains bustling, with a dazzling array of goods, and smiles on everyone's faces. Yet to my eyes, it feels as cold as the snow on the frontier. The beggars on the street corners are only increasing in number. I exchanged the copper coins I had for a few flatbreads and distributed them among the beggars. Qingji sighed and said, "How could you, princess? ever feed all the beggars in this world? I can only manage what's in front of me. Qinghuan came to pick me up, and seeing how I had been exposed to the elements, her eyes welled up with tears. I told her to focus on the important matters. Within a year, Shunlingen was promoted to the position of Grand Council Minister, assisting the emperor in reviewing major cases and overseeing various ministries and departments. An old case implicates the Shui family, the massacre of the Shun family from the duke's residence years ago. Father has already been detained in the imperial prison, and the household is in chaos, waiting only for my return to seek justice. I instructed her to immediately send a visiting card to Shunlingen, prepare water for a bath, and change into fresh clothes. Shunlingen's reply arrived even before I finished bathing. I got ready, prepared the gifts, and was about to set out. Xuening stumbled over in a hurry. I made it clear from the start, I can't take you with me today. She shook her head, looking dazed. Mother wants to see you. Come back and see you again. She tugged at my skirt and knelt before me. Please go see Mother. In the past, what I wanted most was for Xuening to kneel and apologize to me, but now that it's actually happened, it feels rather ordinary. I told her to get up and quickly headed towards the main wife's room. The bitter taste of the medicine made one's throat ache with its harshness. The head wife lay half reclined on the bed, her form withered and her eyes devoid of luster. Only when she saw it was me did her eyes flicker to life, and she waved for everyone else to leave. I have seen many people on the verge of death. She beckoned me over to sit, her breath unsteady. I know that the Shui family's fate is nearing its end. I do not ask you to save the general, but the women in the household are innocent. I beg you, for the sake of how I have never mistreated you, to give these women a way out. I stood by the bedside and did not respond. She smiled bitterly. I know you resent me. When Xuening bullied you as a child, I always remained silent. When you marry someday, take this position, and have children of your own, you will naturally understand everything. I shook my head. I will not understand, nor do I wish to. The lady of the house looked sorrowful. I turned and left, saying, I will find a way to handle the matters concerning the women in the household. There had been no changes in Shunlingen's residence. The pond was still dry, the study was dimly lit, and only when I drew closer did I notice the dark circles under his eyes. He appeared much thinner than the previous year. I asked, how should the family members of the Shui household be dealt with? He replied, the men will be executed, and the women will be given to officials as slaves. It's good to be alive. I smiled and said, Lord Shun, you are about to avenge the hundreds of people in the Shun household. It must feel quite satisfying, right? He looked as usual, as if I were stating something everyone knew. Back then, when the late emperor left the capital to personally campaign against Qiangwu, Shui Jin sought to monopolize power. He colluded with several high-ranking officials to impeach Duke Shun, framing him with charges of treason. Before the late emperor could return to the capital to investigate in detail, over 100 people in the duke's residence were assassinated overnight, and a great fire burned everything to the ground, publicly declaring that Duke Shun had committed suicide out of guilt. The young son, Shunlingen, only 4 years old at the time, was protected by a servant and safely escorted out of the residence. At the age of 6, he ended up in the hands of a human trafficker and was rescued by me. He once had a servant give me a piece of meat, even though I snatched it from a dog's mouth, so I bought him not just because he was good-looking. I tugged at his collar, forcing him to lower his head. I saved your life. And this is how you repay me, he said. My life was saved by you, my lady, listening to sword practice, studying in the palace, becoming the Tanhua scholar, and serving as Minister Shun. Which of these wasn't thanks to your grace? How would you like me to repay you? Shall I offer myself to you? Our lips and tongues entwined. I took the initiative to entice him. He lowered his head to kiss me back, his arms wrapping around me so tightly. Suddenly, I felt a wave of grievance. After all we had been through, having witnessed life and death so often, I had never felt this way before. It turns out what I truly wanted was a warm embrace like this. Lips parted, breaths intertwined. I gasped out, we'll talk about it later. He pushed me away angrily, like a child. Please leave, princess. The head wife did not survive the second day. It seemed she was waiting for me to return, trusting me so much. The entire Shui household was waiting for me to handle the arrangements, and I hadn't had a good night's sleep in days. It was truly more troublesome than going to war. Shui Wn had grown a bit taller. And while her demeanor couldn't be called dignified, it was still graceful. Now, she could even assist me in managing the funeral affairs of the household. I glanced at the panicked Shui Ning, hoping she could pull herself together, as the hard days were still ahead. Shui Yun's in-laws did not allow her to move around anymore and had already sent a letter explaining the reason. Well, the lady didn't even glance at her before she died, so what good would it do to come after her death? Before I could even catch my breath, a messenger from the palace came to summon me. I followed the eunuch into the palace, dressed in plain clothes. The emperor summoned me, but the empress dowager intercepted me first. I have heard of your deeds at the border. They say the daughter of the Shui family is heroic and spirited, no less than a man. Now, looking at you, you resemble your father more. I knelt on the ground and smiled bitterly. When your majesty abandoned me back then, was it because I was a daughter, or were there other unspeakable reasons? Back then, there should have been 3 people who ended up among the commoners: the emperor's wife, a son, and a daughter. During the escape, I was abandoned and nearly became food for the refugees. Later, I encountered Lady Shen, who was praying for her sick son. I knelt and begged her to take me in, to replace her daughter who had died of illness. She grew somewhat anxious. My son was still young back then. And as his mother, I had no other choice. I was only 4 years old at the time. Your Majesty summoned me today, surely not just to discuss these old matters. There was no one else in the hall, her, high and mighty, and me, kneeling and kowtowing. It didn't resemble a mother-daughter relationship at all. Just like the day we met when I was 10, she recognized me at a glance. All that nonsense about a noble destiny fabricated by the court astrologer was nothing but lies. In her eyes, abandoning me back then to protect the prince was not a mistake, but in my eyes, she is simply a mother, and that is unforgivable. She pressed anxiously. And you, a woman entering the military camp, recruiting soldiers, and buying horses all the way north, what exactly are you plotting? I asked her in return. And what about you, Your Highness? Are you truly planning to send me to marry into the Qiangwu tribe? She pointed at me and said, so, are you planning to rebel? Yes. If the emperor issues an edict ordering me to marry into the Qiangwu tribe, I will rebel. I am not afraid even if it means certain death. But more than that, I want to see for myself just how terrifying the Qiangwu people, whom the great Luan describe as fierce and savage, really are, so much so that they would sacrifice a woman to protect the nation. She understood the meaning in my eyes and found it unbelievable. And what about you, Your Highness? Haven't you ever thought about that position? Her eyes widened in shock as she shook her head. No, I felt a deep sense of regret and sorrow even after all these years of regency. Still not. Outside the hall, the eunuch's urging voice could be heard. She stood up and slowly walked over to me. You are still a daughter of the Shui family. The Shui household is on the verge of collapse. Do not do anything foolish. I stared at the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, feeling a deep sorrow in my heart. Is Your Highness so afraid that I might rebel? She took my hand, her touch unfamiliar. You are siblings. After all, you must not turn against each other. Tears streamed down my face. But Mother Empress, I am also your own flesh and blood. In the imperial study, I looked at my younger brother, who was only 2 years my junior. In his childhood, he experienced a life of displacement, lost his father, and ascended the throne at a young age. He knew he held no real power and could not establish himself in the court. Celestial omens and court officials offering their sons were merely means to strengthen his influence. He was unwilling to be manipulated by the Empress Dowager, enduring humiliation and disgrace. When we secretly connected, it was both self-rescue and mutual rescue. I sent Shen Lingen into the palace not only to save myself but also to provide the emperor with capable assistance. And it marked Shen Lingen's day of opportunity. Have you reunited with the Empress Dowager? I suppose so. The two of us seem more suited to the shadows. Now that our identities are laid bare, we don't quite know what to say to each other. He didn't seem to mind and was more interested in hearing stories from the frontier. I talked until my mouth was dry. and he listened with his eyes shining brightly. He said, "Imperial sister, I cannot follow the old path of our late father. I cannot go to the frontier, nor do I have the courage to lead a campaign myself, learning from past mistakes. I am more adept at civil governance. It is enough if the people can have enough to eat, children can receive an education, and talented individuals do not fall into obscurity." As soon as the matter of the marriage alliance was announced, you entered the military camp to lead the troops. I fear that once my decree is issued, regardless of who is chosen for the marriage alliance, you, Imperial sister, would raise an army and march to the frontier. Imperial sister, I entrust the military power of the Shui family to you. If the two of us join forces, the Great Luan Empire will surely remain stable for another 100 years. Shui Jin was executed in the autumn for plotting against loyal and virtuous families. The female members of the family were enslaved. Princess Shuiji had her merits offset her faults, resulting in a 1-year salary deduction and 3 months of confinement. The Shui residence was sealed off, and I moved to the bestowed princess residence. I have purchased all the women of the Shui family, including Shui Ning, but they are not here to enjoy a life of luxury. Their slave status is in my hands, and I decide when they will be freed. 5th Miss Shui Qing was frightened during her imprisonment and passed away within a few days. Her mother followed by dashing her head against the prison wall and dying. The financial resources of the princess's residence are not as strong as those of the Shui family, so the authority to manage and oversee the household will be entrusted to Shui Wan, with the assistance of consort Shen and Qing Luan. The 6th daughter, Shui Li, is now 11 years old and looks very much like Shui Jin. She is tall and mischievous. Unlike most girls, she shows great potential for military training. So I've handed her over to Qing Ji. Shenlingen visits me at the mansion every day. I asked him what he thought about the emperor handing over the Shui family's military authority to me. He said, "Compared to others, Her Majesty trusts her elder sister more." I retorted, "He doesn't even trust the Empress Dowager." With no one else around, he stood by my side and said, "You already know in your heart how to make the choice." I could resolutely head north to the frontier because of the Emperor's impassioned decree. The Great Luan Kingdom does not need anyone to marry for political alliances. He will be a good emperor. In the 10th year of Chongyuan, the emperor had a daughter and named her Jiang Ci. That year, I was 22 years old, leading troops in training and strengthening the border defenses. Shenlingen was a man of integrity, impartial and decisive, with a reputation in the court that was not very favorable, but he was a good official. The emperor summoned me to the palace to see his precious daughter, a porcelain doll, with eyes not even fully open, flailed its limbs in his arms, babbling and cooing. He asked me to hold it too. I stood rigid, like a stone statue. My younger brother, seeing me like this, burst into laughter. He wants to arrange a marriage between me and Shenlingen. I already have a daughter. So you and Minister Shen should hurry up as well. I politely declined, saying I would wait a little longer. In the 15th year of Chongyuan, even Princess Jiang Yu already had 2 sons. The emperor had only one daughter, Jiang Ci. The Empress Dowager, as if possessed, recruited women from official families to fill the imperial harem. I watched the fire from the opposite shore, never expecting my own backyard to catch fire. The princess's estate engaged in corruption and bribery, secretly recruiting soldiers and horses with the intent to rebel. There is ample evidence, both testimonial and physical. The court officials were already dissatisfied with a woman holding an official position and submitted memorials to impeach me, requesting Your Majesty to revoke my military authority. Shenlingen is also not allowed to interfere in this case. The emperor, overwhelmed and distressed, had no choice but to temporarily seal off the princess's residence, prohibiting anyone from entering or leaving. Shenlingen climbed over the wall to visit me. I teased him, "Lord Shen, your wall climbing skills are as good as ever." He wasn't in the mood for laughter and only asked, "Do you have any suspects?" I didn't want to make baseless accusations, so I shook my head and remained silent. He looked anxious but still comforted me. "It's nothing. The official in charge of this matter, Lord Xiu, is my colleague. He will surely clear the Princess Manner's name." I smiled bitterly. But what if someone doesn't want me to be cleared? Shenlingen held me close. Since when has the princess become so fond of speaking such discouraging words? I leaned against him. Shenlingen, once this matter is over, go and ask His Majesty for our marriage. He held me so tightly. All right. No matter the outcome, I'll be with you. 3 months later, the princess's residence was finally cleared of all false accusations. Shwe Wn knelt before the hall, confessing the details of the incident, how she had been blinded by greed, accepted money to carry out the task, framed others with false evidence, and fabricated accounts. She left nothing out. I stared blankly at this person I had personally nurtured and supported. I had even suspected Shwe Ning. Shwe Wn kowtowed to me, tears streaming down her face. Third sister, I'm sorry. The emperor ordered her to be taken away. Only the two of us remained in the hall. He spoke cautiously. This matter involves several civil officials in the court. The Military Affairs Office has discovered that the Empress Dowager frequently corresponded with them. I interrupted him. She still wants to get rid of me. To protect your throne, he still intends to eliminate me completely. Just like when we were children, I kowtowed. Your Majesty is wise. The emperor immediately ordered that the Empress Dowager be confined to the inner palace and forbidden from participating in governance. In the 20th year of the Chongyuan era, His Majesty, having overexerted himself with state affairs, fell gravely ill and was unable to rise. He was only 30 years old. I entered the palace to serve by his bedside. He ordered me to read the daily memorials aloud to him, for by then he could no longer hold a brush, and I had to write everything on his behalf, and so we struggled on until the end of the year. As the sun set in the west, I thought of my father, who had also passed away from illness at the age of 30, the men of my Jiang family, who had devoted themselves entirely to their duties, were all destined to die young. The outer hall was filled with kneeling officials from the 3 councils and 6 ministries. The queen wept by the bedside, covering her face, while the other consorts knelt in a corner. Shenlingen and the state preceptor were both present. The emperor tapped on the hidden compartment beneath the bed, his gaze shifting toward me. I retrieved the items, the Great Luan Imperial Seal and the Edict of Succession. He hadn't spoken for a long time. Breathing heavily, Imperial sister, I entrust Da Luan to you. My heart surged with emotion. After all these years, it felt like that day had returned. I knelt before Shwe Jin, begging him to allow me to join the military camp. His gaze shifted to the ministers, his voice barely a whisper. I appoint the Grand Princess as the heir. The sound stopped abruptly. He looked at me and breathed his last breath. There is no unwillingness, nor any complaint. Crying sounds arose from behind. The state preceptor asked me to read the imperial decree. I unrolled the bright yellow silk scroll, which was filled with eloquent words detailing the deeds and merits of the Grand Princess. Jiang Jie was my original name. I was born during my father's great victory. I was bewildered, my hands trembling as I held the imperial decree. Many voices echo in my ears, the heart-wrenching cries of my younger brother when our mother abandoned us, the secret plans we made to strengthen our power, stabilizing the imperial authority with our own efforts, the military power willingly handed over, and the fierce arguments made to clear my name. He trusted me, the familial affection my mother never gave me. My younger brother bestowed upon me, the Grand Tutor urged. I took a deep breath and made a rebellious decision to alter the imperial edict. The emperor passed the throne to Princess Jiang Ci. The Grand Tutor was also advanced in years, his hair completely white. His gaze upon me was ambiguous, and his expression was equally unclear. In the end, he still knelt down trembling, kowtowed, and exclaimed loudly, "Your servant respectfully sends off your majesty." The female emperor ascended the throne. With legitimacy and justification, I held military power and personally appointed the ministers to assist. Qing Ji traveled far and wide, so I sent people to search for months before finally capturing her and bringing her into the palace to educate her. I rejected the Grand Preceptor's request to retire and return to his hometown, and even set aside a plot of land in the palace for him to farm. He was so angry that he fumed and glared, only daring to curse me a few times when he was drunk. Shenlingen, needless to say, now holds a prominent position in the court as the head of all ministers, and he is also my husband. Li has long shed her slave status, earned scholarly honors, and at just 20 years old, she became the top military scholar, leading troops and fighting battles. She is more skilled than I am and no less capable than any man. With her guarding the borders, I am at ease. Shenlingen advised me, using past mistakes as a warning, to be cautious of the Shui family. How could I not know this principle? But now, with a young girl ascending the throne and a woman as the regent, the louder the voices of doubt in the court, the more I insist on going against the current, opening the state examinations to select outstanding women as officials and generals. Yet what I seek is not merely women, but extraordinary talents from across the land, loyal ministers who can serve as pillars of the state, and those who can assist in securing the future of the great Luan dynasty. Jiang Xi was only 10 years old, but born into the royal family and personally taught by her younger brother, she possessed a resilient character from a young age. Remaining calm in the face of danger and displaying the demeanor of an emperor, she kowtowed to me and said, "Aunt." I helped her up and said, "From now on, you need not kneel to anyone, you are the ruler of the world." In the spring of the following year, the female emperor ascended the throne and changed the era name to Yuanwu. The second year of Yuanwu, the princess's residence was meticulously managed by Shui Ning, and the several concubines had also learned some skills, so they could survive even if they left the residence. The person I once hated the most is now the one who has stayed with me the longest. Shui Ning is a year older than me and still remains unmarried. I teased her, "You're not still dreaming about Shenlingen, are you?" Her face flushed red, but she said something else. "Princess, you've changed a lot, it must have been a tough journey for you." I tilted my head back to take a drink, swallowing my tears along with the wine. When I was young, all I wanted was to survive. If someone bullied me, I would retaliate, holding grudges over the smallest slights. As I grew older, to stay alive, I learned to scheme and calculate, putting my own interests above others. I replied, "People always change, and so have you." We looked at each other and smiled, but it wasn't a reconciliation. That year, Jiang Yu died in childbirth, her beauty fading away. She is only 30 years old. I held Shenlingen's hand and began to speak some rebellious words again. Why is our royal family full of short-lived people? None of us live past 30. He didn't speak but instead held my hand tightly, gripping it so firmly. I chuckled and said, "But that's not right, I'm already over 30 years old." He wouldn't let me say any more. "We will live a long life," I said again. "You won't blame me for not giving you a child, will you?" He shook his head. "Everything you do is my will. It's good that you don't blame me." In the 6th year of Yuanwu, General Meng Zhongjiang, the guardian of the nation, passed away. Shui Li was appointed to a critical position and sent to the frontier. Assuming his duties as ordered, I suddenly wanted to go to the frontier again to see the snow-capped mountains and glacier. Jiang Xi was now 16 years old and had truly become an empress capable of standing on her own. Despite her reluctance to let me go, she allowed me to leave for a year and urged me to return as soon as possible. She even sent Shenlingen and Qingwan along with me. Shenlingen asked me, "Is it because you don't trust Shui Li?" I blamed him for overthinking, saying that assisting the empress was too exhausting and I just needed a break to relax. Winter had already begun in the capital, and he habitually warmed my hands. As we left the capital, he finally asked the question that had remained unspoken for years. "Do you regret it?" I shook my head firmly, unyielding. Back then, when I altered the imperial edict, Shuiji never regretted it for the rest of her life. I am not skilled in governing, nor am I fit to be an empress. The cold wind lifted the curtain, and I saw that the street corner where I once begged no longer had children shivering from the cold. The hungry were fed. Children were educated, the people had land to farm, and merchants could conduct their trade, regardless of gender. The world is one community. If someone can do it, that is my wish. After hearing the two stories above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.